Good morning to each of you. Greet you in Jesus' name this morning. Sunday school we talked about riches, and then Irvin talked about losing everything, and now we'll see what we talk about here this morning. The title of the message this morning is the Sin of Omission. So the topic for today is an interesting one in that as Christians we are constantly on guard, doing our best not to commit sin. And I think, especially in my mind anyway, usually when we think of sin, we think about sins that we commit. In other words, we watch our language, we don't swear or tell untruths, we try not to lie. We stay away from evil influences and make sure we aren't getting tangled up in something that we know to be wrong. We don't kill or steal. Those are acts of commission. And I think we spend much of our time, or all of our time, doing our best not to commit a sin. There's a verse in James that might not be as high in your consciousness. I know I've read it many times in the past, but haven't spent a lot of time meditating on it. And that verse is James chapter 4, verse 17. It's right at the end of the chapter there. It says, "Therefore to him that knoweth to do good, and doeth it not, to him it is sin." Sort of an interesting verse just to read all by itself. So to put a little bit of context around it, we're going to go back a couple of verses to verse 13 of James chapter 4. It says, Go to now, ye that say, today or tomorrow we will go into such a city and continue there a year, and buy and sell and get gain. Whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little while, and then vanisheth away. But that ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live, and do this or that. But now ye rejoice in your boastings, all such rejoicing is evil. Therefore, to him that knoweth to do good, and doeth it not, to him it is sin. So these verses leading up to verse 17 are talking about life. We have our calendars, we make plans, we have goals that we're hoping to achieve. We sort of lay things out as we think that they should happen, and we go with that. And whether it's in our personal life, personal goals, or whether it's in our careers, our work life, both of those things, we sort of plan what we expect to happen. But James is saying that we spend all this time making assumptions about the future, but in reality, you have no idea what tomorrow holds, or even later today, that could affect your life. There are many things that are outside of our control that will change our plans, the plans that we have made. Just as an example, I'm not sure if anyone here was flying with Air Canada about a month ago, but suddenly the flight attendants walked off the job. They went on strike, grounding hundreds of flights in many parts of the world. So I talked to someone that I knew he was stuck in a country. He wanted to come home, and he couldn't. His flight was canceled, so there he was, where he didn't want to be at that time anymore. So if your plan was to fly Air Canada, you needed to cancel your plans or else find another way to get where you wanted to go. And that was something that was completely outside of your control. So your plans changed. Personal experience for me was the day that I had the accident where I fell inside the grain dryer that I was cleaning. I had my day mapped out that day. My supervisor was away, and so he had left me a list of jobs that I was to do while he was gone. And I decided that I wanted to get the least fun job done first so that I could do the more fun jobs after that. And more fun for me involved driving the tractor, and that was what was going to be after I got done with the grain dryer. So the grain dryer job was to sweep all the dirt from off the walls inside there and to the bottom and clean it out. That was the plan. And during that process, I fell from the top 28 feet down. And just like that, I was out of commission for almost 2 months. This was not in my plan, but like the verse in James here says, our lives are like a vapor. They're short and unpredictable, so easily changed in a split second. In verse 15 here, James is saying that we should live our lives with the knowledge that God is in control of all things. And therefore, we should say, if God wills it, then I will go and do this or that. The ungodly live with the impression that they are the masters of their own destiny, and there is nothing outside of them that can change things, and that with enough perseverance and determination that they can achieve their goals. How do you view your life? Are you the master of your destiny? Or do you live with the knowledge that there is a sovereign God who is in control of all things? Not only just a sovereign God, but a sovereign God who loves you and is guiding your life and may have a change course for your benefit or for your correction, which can also happen. Many things happen in our lives that we don't choose and could be a result of someone else's bad choices. But God promises that if we are a child of His, we will never be left alone. He will be with us through whatever it is that we face. And God can use any circumstance we face for His glory if we choose to let Him. So then in verse 16 there, James is warning his readers that at the present they were boasting about things that they had accomplished as if they had done it on their own strength. And I know we're guilty of this sometimes. You know, we like to talk about all the things that we did right in order to get to where we are. I know I'm guilty of it. And in the farming world, if you get a good yield on a crop, then we like to take some credit for the management of that crop and, you know, what all went into achieving that really good yield. But had God not caused the seed to germinate in the first place, if God had not brought the rain and the sun and the heat and caused the biology in the soil to convert the nutrients that we put there into plant available food, there would be no crop, no matter what I tried to do. And I've been told that we as farmers influence as little as 10 to 15% of the final yield, which is a little bit hard on our pride. We like to boast about our skills, the things that we're good at. But do we remember that since we are God's creation, that we should be directing all praise back to Him. I do believe it is okay to humbly accept compliments from people, but we need to be watchful that it doesn't lead to pride in our hearts. And we should look for ways to direct people's attention back to our Creator, especially if we're interacting with unbelievers. But along with that, the fact that you have excelled at something, sorry, I lost my spot here. The fact that you have excelled at something, you have probably worked hard to reach that level. And so I believe it is okay to humbly accept praise for your accomplishment or your hard work. Thank God publicly if appropriate, or in your heart if it isn't the time to publicly acknowledge God in that place. But the point is that we should have an awareness of God's sovereignty working in our lives and not have a heart full of pride, believing that all your gifts and abilities came from a gorilla and that you've developed them from there. I hope that's not the case. So then we come to verse 17. To him that knows to do good and doesn't do it, to him it is sin. So this is called a sin of omission, a sin of not doing something, versus commission, where you actively do something sinful. And I wonder if you can think of something from this past week, now that you've been thinking about this, where you suddenly feel convicted about something that you didn't do, that maybe now you think, oh, maybe I should have done that. How far do you take this? If I walked past someone this week that I could have helped but didn't, did I just sin? Or if I've been meaning to message somebody to encourage them but kept pushing it off and didn't do it, is that also a sin? Or if someone asked me to do something that I know I could do, but I just don't want to, is that sin? If I ignore the homeless guy with the cardboard sign asking for money, and I have some with me, but I want to keep it for Timmy's later on, is that sin? If I know I should forgive someone and don't, is that sin? If I know the truth about something, but don't tell anyone, is that sin? I think we could turn this into a real guilt trip experience. But at the same time, it's sobering to think about as well. But what is dangerous is to take one verse from the Bible and to come to all kinds of conclusions about it, what we think it means, without bringing some more context and looking into more verses about it. So to do that, we're going to keep reading here in James chapter 5, verses 1 to 6. It says, "Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is to you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton." Wanton means self-indulgent. "Ye have nourished your hearts as in the day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you." we'll stop there. So verses 1 to 3 have some pretty strong language for the person who loves money. So that ties into the Sunday school lesson here a little bit. And the last part of verse 3 there gives the warning that the person who spends his time accumulating riches for the last days will in the end find them worthless. Wealth will not save you when you come to the end of your life. And now, if we look at verses 4, 5, and 6, we can pick out some neglect that happened here. So verse 4, it says, "Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth. And the cries of them which have reaped have entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Because you did not pay your employees or your servants a fair wage, or defrauded them in some way, you might have had an agreement with them that you didn't keep, the cries, the voices of these laborers has reached the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth." Now that sounds ominous. The Lord of Sabaoth. What does it mean? This is generally translated as the Lord of hosts or the Lord of heaven's armies. In other words, the person or authority to whom will carry out justice at the end of life. That's who is hearing these cries. He isn't there just as a figurehead, but he has a job to do, and not only that, he has the power to do it. He has all of heaven's armies to mete out justice. You don't want to be on the wrong side of the Lord of heaven's armies. So the man that knows that he should treat his employees fairly and doesn't has committed the sin of omission, and it will not go unpunished. On the other hand, if you are being taken advantage of by someone and you can't do anything about it, be sure that the Lord of Sabaoth hears your cries and will mete out justice when the time comes. Until then, God is with you in your situation, and justice will come. So that's one instance of the rich taking advantage of the poor. And the lesson for us is, if we know we could treat someone more fairly than we are guilty of the sin of omission. Jesus asks us to be servants to all, to love all mankind. And how are we doing with that? Are we fair in our business dealings? Are we fair in our expectations of other people? Do we keep our agreements? Our yes should be yes, and our no should be no. All right, verse 5. "Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in the day of slaughter." Here we have another example of omission. The wealthy person here is choosing to be self-indulgent with their resources and to enjoy all the pleasures for themselves that their money can buy. And this fits into the context that we talked about in the last few verses the last few verses of chapter 4. This person refuses to acknowledge God. He gets gain for himself. He treats his workers unfairly. And then he goes and lives the high life, living only for himself. I wonder if this man ever tithed. Do you think he ever gave anything back? Do you think he used his resources to help someone put their child through school or put food on the table? Did he ignore the needs around him and keep everything to himself? If we think that all we have is ours and only spend it on ourselves, we are guilty of the sin of omission. Jesus taught that we should not think of our possessions as our own, but that we should view them as God's and use them accordingly as good stewards of what he has given us. And then in verse 6, he condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. This guy doesn't sound very nice at all. He killed people that got in his way. This person wasn't afraid to take things into his own hands and destroy the lives of others who had no way of resisting. And in this case, I see the sin of omission turning into the sin of commission. He is now moved further. We can imagine how he omitted telling the truth to condemn these people, but then he actually went forward and he committed murder and lies. It all comes back to a godless life where a person believes that they have all the authority necessary to do the things they want without regard for their fellow man. And if we understand that we are under the authority of God and subject to his laws, and that all mankind has equal value, then that will change the way that we live. I'd like to look at another passage in the New Testament, back in Luke. And this is Jesus' words to his disciples and to those listening. Luke chapter 12. And maybe part of this is what influenced James's writing, I'm not sure. Luke chapter 12, and we'll start at verse 35 and read to verse 40. Let your loins be girded about, and your lights burning, and ye yourselves like unto men that wait for their Lord, when he will return from the wedding, that when he cometh and knocketh, they may open unto him immediately. Blessed are those servants whom the Lord, when he cometh, shall find watching. Verily I say unto you, that he shall gird himself, and make them to sit down to meat, and will come forth and serve them. And if he shall come in the second watch, or come in the third watch, and find them so, blessed are those servants. And this know, that if the goodman of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched, and not have suffered his house to be broken through. Be ye therefore ready also, for the Son of Man cometh at an hour when ye think not. Jesus is speaking here and warning his followers to be ready for when he comes. He points out that the servants are to be actively watching, waiting for the master to come back. And then it says there that the faithful servants will be rewarded and will be served by the master. We all know that if we knew the day and the hour that the thief would try to break into the house, that we would be ready for him and take measures against it. Would it not also be the same if we knew when exactly Jesus was going to return? Would you live for yourself until close to the time that Jesus was to return and then quickly get your house in order? We are supposed to live a consistent life, waiting and ready for the Lord to return. I'd like to continue reading here, verses 41 to 48. Then Peter said unto him, Lord, speakest thou this parable unto us, or even to all? And the Lord said, Who then is that faithful and wise steward, whom his Lord shall make ruler over his household, and give them their portion of meat in due season? Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Of a truth I say unto you, that he will make him ruler over all that he hath. But if that servant say to it in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to beat the men servants and maidens, and to eat and drink and be drunken, the Lord of that servant will come in a day when he looketh not for him, and at an hour when he is not aware, and he will cut him in sunder, and will appoint him his portion with the unbelievers. And that servant which knew his Lord's will, and prepared not himself, neither did according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. But he that knew not, and did commit things worthy of stripes, shall be beaten with few stripes. For unto whomever much is given, of him shall be much required. And to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more. These verses here, we see the opposite of the faithful servant that we read about in the earlier verses. He used the time that his master was away to mistreat his fellow servants and to eat and drink to the point of drunkenness. And if the master shows up while this is happening, he will experience very severe punishment to the point of losing his position and being cast out. Now in verse 47, he knew what he should be doing, and he didn't do it. He knew the will of the master, but did not do according to the will. That, again, is the sin of omission. The one who knew but didn't do was more severely beaten than the one who knew not and did wrong. He received fewer stripes. He wasn't innocent, it says there, but he got less stripes. And then we have the last part there of verse 48. For unto whomever much is given, of him much shall be required. A sobering reminder for us who know how we should be living. I wonder if this is what James is thinking of when he wrote that verse. It's not enough to say we know how to live. It's also not enough to know how to live. We are responsible for the actions that we have the knowledge of. If we choose to omit things that we know are part of how we should live, we are held responsible. We will be held responsible for them. However, if we live what we know and are watching and waiting for our appointment with the Lord, we will find a banquet feast waiting for us, where the Lord himself will serve us. So if you know how you should be living, but are not living what you know, you are in danger of the sin of omission. God's standard is high, but it is not unattainable. Generally, I think we know how to live. Many times we become complacent and don't have the alertness or urgency that we should to keep watching. Life has a way of lulling us to sleep to the point where we may be not doing the things that we know we should be. May this be a wake-up call for all of us. We don't want to be found asleep when the Lord shows up at our door. Whether we meet him in the air or we cross the river of death and meet him on the other side, either way, the meeting is imminent. May we have a renewed vigor and zeal to be faithful servants with the things that he has put in our trust. Why don't we stand together for closing prayer? Father in heaven, we come before you at the close of this service. Lord, just thanking you again for being present with us. Thank you for teaching us. Help us to understand your words to us. Father, help us to be faithful in this Christian life as we strive to be your followers, to be your servants. Lord, help us to be watchful and to be alert. Help us to do the things that we know that we should be doing and not ignore or become complacent or fall asleep when we should be watching. Lord, I just pray for each person here that they would have a renewed sense of just living life and with sort of the deeper meaning behind our lives. That we're not just living for ourselves, but we're living for your honor and for your glory. We're living to love our brothers and sisters around us. We're living to show your light to the world of darkness. And Father, I just pray that we would be consistent in the things that we do and say as we interact with them. So Father, I ask that ask your blessing on us as we part. Just be with us as we go from here, and may we be a living sacrifice to you. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. This time I'll call on a closing song. In your hymns of the church, number 383. 383. Oh, for a closer walk with God.